What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. It is Lane and Phil, as always, and we have really been enjoying this new series, and you guys seem to be really liking it. We're talking all about the missions that you play and how you should go about playing them, whether you're first, whether you're second, and how that is really going to play out for you. So, Phil, what mission are we diving into today?
Yeah, we're gonna hit a mission that I did last night on stream, a Scorched Earth. It is one of the unique missions in 40k 10th edition, and we will see iterations of this as you continue to play 40k. I doubt this is the last we've seen of a weird mission, and Scorched Earth is definitely one of them. It is not your traditional take and hold style mission like we did in our first video. This is definitely more of a unique one and has a little bit more of a nuance because the main rule behind it is you need to burn objectives, which means it takes a full turn to do, like full battle round to do. If you started on your turn, it will not complete until your following turn. It destroys the objective. It gives 5 VP for no man's land objectives, 10 VP for your opponent's deployment zone objective, and you can only burn one per turn. So you can only complete one per turn and start one per turn. The other stipulation behind it is you have to control the objective, which is significant because there are things that your opponent can do to stop it, to stop the burn, whether it be killing a unit or auto-seeing the unit or whatever the case is, right? Like there are things that we can do to prevent a burn. And if you are going to do the action, it means you can't shoot, you can't charge, you can't do any of these things. So for a lot of newer players, it's like, man, how do I choose the right time to burn?
Yeah, it definitely it definitely takes a little bit of nuance, takes a little bit of, it takes some time getting used to playing on the mission. I have seen people who just they start trying to burn things way too quick and maybe even on their side of the board. So that's not always great, right? It is always better to make sure you're just standing there and getting 10 primary. I mean, that seems fairly obvious, but we got to make sure we go over it just to make sure any new players, like, you know what, we probably don't need to be looking for burns before turn 4. Like that should be a solid rule. It is the mission rule, but you're not going to be racking up stuff. You can still threaten burns. You can still try to force things to happen by going for burns, but
Yeah.
expecting them and building a play around actually accomplishing that mission is generally not going to be a very good idea, because the objectives you do want to burn are ones your opponent is probably easily going to be able to contest and knock you off of.
Yeah, and the other downside of that is if you are fortunate enough to burn your opponent's no man's land objective, that would be the only time that I'd probably be okay with an early burn. Um, but if you're able to do your opponent's no man land objective, I would say you're already in a strong position in the game. So Blaine is absolutely right. Right off the bat, my first point of recommendation is none of these objectives should we be thinking about burning turn 1 in any way. It's just not what we should be doing. Um, we should just be looking at denying our opponent, killing our opponent, anything like that. Turn 1 through 3. I would not be recommending anyone to try to burn objectives in any way. Fair? Can we set that as a
Yes.
rule of thumb?
Yes, I mean, technically, right? Like, you can't start burning until turn 2, but yes, like
Correct.
from
Yeah.
the beginning of the game, you can't. You should be looking to really pull off an early burn. I think there's like only a very few exceptions. Like, you have to be the ultimate jail army, and your plan is, hey, I'm going to apply the pressure and just apply the gas, and if I can hopefully jail them, burn theirs, and then kind of fall back, I don't have to hold that side of the board anymore because they can't score anything over there, right? Like, that's a theoretical, but there are not really many armies that can pull that off effectively. I mean, you have to be running, a local in our community, Jameson, just running nothing but pink horrors, nurglings, blue horrors, just a list that's 100% trying to jail you. If you were playing that army and you infiltrated everything you have, you're trying to jail your opponent, maybe you can burn your opponent's natural and then start falling back. That's like the nichest scenario in the world. But
Yeah.
I do at least want to say it can work. It just probably won't.
Yeah, building an army based to do that is either list tailoring because you're only doing one mission, or that is the only mission you're going to play well, and there's a lot of other ones that you're going to really struggle with. So I would not personally recommend it. It would be very, very tough.
Yeah,
Okay,
100%.
all right. So now we're talking about beyond turn 3. As I said in the beginning, if we are managed to burn our opponent's deployment zone objective, that is 10 VP. if we manage to burn it. That would be a huge swing in any game. There are armies that can do it a lot easier, mainly ones that can go back into reserve. So I believe Search and Destroy benefits an army that has the mobility to go back into reserve. If you don't have the capabilities to do that, I'm not saying that you can't do those things. It just gets a lot harder because the mobility and what you're threatening, if you're able to get in your opponent's deployment zone easier with a rapid ingress and then walk onto your opponent's objective, especially late turn 4, turn 5, um, is very beneficial for armies that have the capabilities to go back into deep strike. Armies like GSC, armies like even Eldar, armies like Space Marines, right? Like those have the tools to go back into reserve. And if even if one of your units is capable of doing it, I would say in a mission like Scorched Earth, that unit is a lot more valuable, um, sometimes than in a lot of other missions.
Yeah, 100%. The flexibility it just gives you, right? It makes your opponents stay on their toes. They have to worry about rapid ingresses into the late game, right? It can really be something you can try to use to your advantage. And there's different ways that you can still do that even without an up down army, right? Like we'll say as a guard player, I could just decide, because the other thing we talked about, you can only ever score 10 points for holding 2 objectives,
Yep.
right? If it's an army that I'm like, man, I can't really go interact with them. Maybe it's not a favorable layout. I just can't really go deny their natural super easy. I can just try to play the game and try to just keep taking resources away and try to make them come to me. So they're thinner, they're more spread out, right? And try to get them to where maybe they can't cover all of the sides of the board for a deep strike unit, or, reinforcements if I'm playing that detachment that I can bring in into the late game. I'm going to try to make them keep stepping forward without overextending myself, and just try to stay up on material, and just keep pushing the game in that direction. So there are ways to still try to abuse this. As Phil was saying, though, it is, I agree. I think it's way more simple if you just have up down in your army, but there are other things you can do to try to get your opponent to give you openings, because hitting that home objective is very, very good if you can pull it off, but it,
Yeah.
it takes more finesse than a lot of other play styles, I will say, without an up down army.
For sure. So I was on a live stream for Mastercrafted last night, and we did a Scorched Earth mission. Um, Patrick and I, neither of us burned an objective. There was at no point during the game where we were capable of doing so because we were so focused on attempting to deny and score and kill. So at no point did we deny. And the game, like, it was obviously very tight, with me squeaking out the win. So like there are ways to win this matchup without having to burn, but you have to focus on removal of assets, and you have to make sure that at the end of the game your opponent is in a position where they can't burn anything. Some thoughts you need to put in the back of your head. And we talked about going first and second in the Take and Fold video. Guess what? Nothing changes here. Going first or going second, there are things that we need to do to make sure we're in a position to win the game. Going first. We don't necessarily have to burn because there may not be an opportunity to do so, but there are things we need to do to make sure that our opponent can't burn. For a lot of players, they are not putting themselves in a position where they are engaging or killing things in combat. So I'm talking about your rhinos, your wave serpents, your rock grinders, your trucks, whatever the case is. You should be using those end of turn 4 to make sure, or end of turn 5 to make sure that your opponent doesn't have the capabilities to burn objectives. That does not mean charge everything. That does mean that you need to make sure you're identifying the units that could actually get on objectives. You are pre-measuring those things. So if I see, a unit of boys here, well, I'm measuring this distance and saying, okay, well, you are within range of that, and I have a rhino on the other side of this wall, and I'm just going to come around and tag you, rely on the fact that there's a strong possibility you don't kill me. And then now I know that Orc Boys unit can't get on this objective to burn it because they're within engagement range, right? They can't fall back and do an action. I'm doing the same thing come turn 3, 4, and 5. I'm positioning myself around objectives and saying, especially the person going first, and you can watch it in my game against Patrick, you can see the positions I'm in that I'm trying to either deny him or make sure that I'm tying things up, especially when it comes to turn 4, turn 5, to make sure that my opponent doesn't have the opportunity to burn objectives. Super important, and it's one of the things going first you have to keep in your mind. Because I'll just remind you, because this is one of the things that it can hurt. Your opponent can start a burn action turn 4. Let's say they burn their natural. Well, if they burn their natural, they don't score primary until their bottom of 5. So burning their natural actually doesn't affect them as much as it does affecting you if you try to burn turn 4. If you try to burn turn 4 going first, you will not score primary come turn 5. Your opponent actually has a chance to score, and when Scorched Earth, the mission, meaning you only have to control 2 objectives, it is definitely a lot easier for the person going bottom of 5 than it is for the person going top. So the thing you need to put in your mind, especially the person going first, is how am I going to deny? The rules for take and hold still apply, right? I want to deny him at least twice. I want to make sure I put my opponent on 5 minimum at least twice. And I also got to make sure they don't get a huge swing. Because if I'm going second and I manage to burn my natural, and then I have an up-down army, or I have the mobility, or I can just out OC you on your home, I could then burn your home objective, bottom of 5, and it will complete at the end of game. So that is a 15-point swing, not counting the primaries that I score for those 2 turns. So if, let's say I do score 10 on those 4 and 5, right? We're talking about 35 points in 2 turns just on primary alone. Just on primary alone.
Yeah, it really is. If you can pull it off and play for that late game as a bottom of turn player, it is insane the number of points you rack up in the last turn and a half of the game, right? Like, and I think what you brought up, Phil, is one of the things I don't see enough of in people I'm playing. And sometimes, like, I feel like I probably maybe should do it a little more myself. The army I play doesn't facilitate it as easily, but burning your own natural, if you have bottom of turn 4, is so strong. Too many people are looking at it. They're like, well, I'll get the burn at the bottom of 5. And it's actually harder for them to do that because they're less resources, right? You've lost another round of units. And you also, like, you still have secondaries to score that turn, right? Again, it's so much harder to get a burn off. And you might only need the 1, but it's easier to burn turn 4 and then just try to hold 2 on turn 5 versus holding 1 and burning 1 on turn 5. You might not be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do have to position yourself properly. So if we're talking about burning this objective, I'm thinking about, like, if we talk about an area that I need to control, right? Depending on the army, like every single one of them does it differently. Like if we talk about Eldar, warp spiders are still a problem, right? Like, but I'm looking at all the units in this area that can threaten this objective, and what am I doing to make sure that my burn goes off, right? Am I tying them up? Am I killing them? Am I move blocking them? Whatever the case is, I need to make sure I'm looking at that area and say, okay, I've checked it. Nothing can get to this objective and stop me from burning. Great. Now is the time I burn on bottom of 4. Because, like Lane was saying, it is easier. Because if that objective is burned, that just means I need to control 2. And if I can manage to control my home, and I could just find resources to control 1 more, I should have the points advantage. Should.
Yep, I think that's, a very good framing of kind of that game style that isn't seen a ton, but very strong if you can pull it off. As we look at going first, though, on the inverse, an opponent that is trying to play slow and make sure they have a lot left to have that strong of turn 4 and turn 5, they're looking to still get some denials in somewhere. And especially if you have an army that has more units, right? You're a little more expendable. Putting stuff, whether it's on the middle and your natural or whatever, but making sure that to deny you from getting your 10 as the top of turn player, you're forcing them to come deal with 2 objectives that turn. And that'll help you set that tempo to, really hopefully prevent them from having enough left that you're still in a primary version of the game a little bit tighter, right? You need to find ways to make them come deal with you. So that way, as the top of turn player, hopefully you've burned through enough of their stuff. Same thing when we were talking about take and hold, right? You want to make sure bottom of turn players are lower on resources than you are. That is how you play top of turn.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. We may sound like a broken record, right? Like, oh, you're bottom of 5, you're going second, right? Like, just play for the late game, play for the late game, play for the late game. That is an overarching strategy that you can build all your other strategies into, right? Like, we can play for the late game, but I could do so by pressuring my opponent or removing assets or like having, I don't know, like even a denial strategy, right? Like I can have a denial strategy going second, play for the late game, and my denial pieces are cheap, reusable, and disposable, right? Like they don't actually affect my game plan. My army's still just as lethal, even with those things. So like there are there are intricacies within the game plan of going second, that isn't just like castle up and let your opponent like run into you and then be like, okay, I'm just playing for the late game. So what I mean by that is let's use a very common unit uh in Space Marines, which is a combi weapon lieutenant, right? If I let's say hypothetically, I start the combi lieutenant. I start him here, and I just say, okay, I've measured this out, right? This is 6 inches. I make sure that I can get on that objective, if I absolutely need to, because the turn one I pull area denial, and I want to get on there that way I can score. Um, Great, fantastic. Like we still do those things even if we're going second because those are great scoring pieces unless like I think there's a good example Liam VSL in the game against I believe Jack Harpster, his Emperor's Children. He gave up area denial because he was able to put his Howling Banshees into a more valuable unit, which was the Rhino, tagging it, preventing it from getting into the rest of Liam's army, right? Like we're talking about a high level play there, even in a mission where he gave up points. But for you, I would like you to think about how often and how efficiently we're scoring secondaries and primaries. So, like a unit like a Combi Weapon Lieutenant, there's a reason it's so popular. It's because it's one of the best units in the game. It's durable, it's effective, it has a reactive move, it has a 3-up and a 5-up Feel No Pain. It's just annoying. It's just really annoying. So, yeah, like I'm still playing the game. Maybe instead of pushing out my screens all the way past this point, right? Maybe I'm doing something like where I'm just putting one unit on the objective and being okay with my opponent denying me because I'm looking for them to waste resources. That way I can get to the end of the game. Um, but as we said, that's a slippery slope because if they watch our videos, the first player knows they want to deny you at least twice. So if they can deny you twice, right, that's a 10-point buffer that they've already created for themselves, especially if you're not able to deny them in return because you're so concerned with playing the late game, right? So it's a double-edged sword. If your opponent identifies the fact that you're not willing to give up resources and they're able to pressure you and deny you multiple times, and then you come back and hit us up in the Discord or like, hey, I played for the late game, but I still lost. Well, it's a double-edged sword. You can't do that if your opponent is pressuring you and denying you over and over again. It's not an auto win if you get to the end of the game and you have 1,500 points left.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, right, it obviously depends on how elite your army is, but you should just have like an expected, we'll say 600 to 800, depending on how elite you are, of things that are either going to just die for secondaries, die for denial, just be screening, taking some space so that you can prevent deep strikes. Like you just should have roughly in your army, probably about like 6 to 800 points of things that you're just like, there's no way that makes it past turn 3 or turn 4, like on average. Like those things are generally dead as you go into the late game. Like that's just the minimum tax. And then you have the rest of your army that is going to be trading out as necessary as the game progresses.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that's where list building becomes so fantastic, right? Like every army will deal with those things differently. In a mission like Scorched Earth, um an army that has the capabilities, excuse me, to have the durability to get to the end game or the redundancy in units to make sure at the end of the game they have activations left to do things like burn objectives and still achieve secondaries is awesome. It's very, very good.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I think the only other thing I can kind of think of with Scorched, we talked a little bit with up down armies and stuff, but I think because you need less in the middle, we advocate a lot for having good rapid ingress targets. Search is probably one of the most beneficial for having things off the board. Just
Yeah.
in general, you don't have to contest the middle. Like you're not losing anything most of the time. Like as long as you're not the one starting the trade war in the middle, or like you're not really denying them anyway, kind of depends on the flow of the game. Like you can have an extra resource or two off the board that they have to keep in mind that is going to come on and maybe be a problem for them late game, right? So I do think that is something I keep in mind a little bit when I'm playing is like, it's Scorched, I don't really have to play in the middle depending on matchup, right? There's other matchups where it's like, I want to force you out as often and as fast as possible. I'm going to keep putting units out, and either you deal with them or I'm going to get a burn off, right? I'll throw a guard squad in the middle, or I'll slide Marbo, right? Something that is just small and annoying. And if you're an elite army, it's going to feel terrible to feel like you absolutely have to go kill them, right?
Yeah.
So look at your matchups. See, do you have, and that's something I guess we haven't really talked about yet, is when should you be burning to force your opponent, right? Like how does that part of the game work?
Yeah. It's interesting because there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I would never think about burning my own natural at all before what we just talked about. The only reason I would burn my own natural is if I was going second and I was able to start the burn on the bottom of 4. That would be the only time I would burn my own natural. Now, there are reasons I would burn the middle potentially, especially if my opponent hasn't pulled something like Secure No Man's Land. Especially if I'm in a position where, like, I keep using it as an example, but it's a good example. If I'm going first and I want to apply pressure, right? It's not about necessarily killing, but if I string a unit of, let's say, I don't know, just bikes, Ellen Jackals, and I run them out like this, and I start to burn on the middle, and I say, okay, I'm going to burn this middle unless you come out. Because I want him to come out. I have to get him to start trading assets. But if you let me burn this right off the bat, that is 5 points in the pocket. And with my GSC, I will be able to keep you off my natural. I will be able to screen out the board. You will not be able to get close. I don't care if it's a flying unit. It does not matter. You will not get close to my natural. Right? So now my opponent has a choice. They either allow me as the person going first to have the burn on the middle because they don't want to give up an asset because they are playing for the late game, or they come out and kill that. And I should be, as long as I've evaluated my opponent's units right, I should be in a position where I can kill that thing that comes out to kill those bikes. Um, but bikes are kind of tough to kill sometimes. So um, there's value on both sides for sure.
Yeah, I agree. You talked about the center, we talked about your own natural. You hardly ever do that. If it ever does present itself to burn your opponent's natural, if you accomplish it, you're probably just already winning the game.
Yeah.
So there's probably not a ton of reason. I do think there is something interesting, especially on this search and destroy that we're looking at right now. You can also kind of determine, how easy is it for you to, pull the old the washing machine and go all the way around, right? You trying to whip yourself around the board in order to hopefully burn their home. A lot of fast melee armies like World Eaters will try to do this, right? You try to leave just enough in your home and stuff to have good OC to not let it happen to yourself. But you're also just trying to, it might not be worth it to burn a no man's land objective. If you can really just apply enough pressure and whip around, you don't care that your natural eventually gets lost, right? If you're holding their natural and your home for long enough, and then you burn their home for 10 and you have enough that can make sure that your own home doesn't get burned, that's an easy 10-point primary swing for an army that's already pretty fast and very good at denying, because you're just going to go fight on their natural over and over again until you overload that side, and then you swing and go for their home.
Yep. Yeah, but that has to be the game plan, right? Like on a layout like this, there is a world where like you can start units here relatively safely, depending on your opponent's setup, right? You can attack this side of the board, right? And then once you can get into this pocket right here, that's a great place to be to launch stuff into your opponent's deployment zone, right? Like that is good. That is very, very doable. But you have to have the game plan in your list building, in your deployment to actually go do those things. So maybe it's Space Wolves and it's Thunderwolf Cav, and you're attacking the objective this way. Great, fantastic. Um, but you have to have that game plan. You have to be prepared to go, and you have to be flexible if it doesn't work. Um, yeah, because that is an avenue that you can go after if you have the right.
Yep, for sure. I mean, on that note, that was another great example of things. If you haven't seen our layout videos, that like specific tip, I felt like I just got deja vu. I'm pretty sure we went over it when we were talking about this search and destroy layout of like, hey, you can wheel pretty hard if you're one of those armies. So if you haven't checked those out, go check them out. Phil, anything else as we're talking about search and destroy?
No, think if just like Scorched in general, it is one of those weird missions. I understand for a lot of players why it feels very daunting to be like I don't know when to burn. I don't know when to do these things. I would say personally, do not get overwhelmed with the fact that you need to or don't need to burn. You
Mhm.
can win a game if you just focus on the things that I talked about in the beginning, which is denying your opponent from burning, which means tying things up, going and killing them. And then also when you get to turn 4, turn 5, making sure that your opponent can't burn your deployment zone objective, your home objective. So like if you do both of those things, you're already going to be scoring better. But I would never ever like if we just talk about like baseline rules, the only reason I would burn 4 is if I was the person going second. If I'm going first, the only reason I would be burning is because like I'm already dominating the game and I can be in a position where I can burn the no man's land objective in the middle or my opponent's, and I'm probably already winning the game at that point, which is fine. Like sometimes I want points, right? Like sometimes it's a team setup or a tournament like points differential matters or points scoring matters, right? Where I want to score as many points as possible. Totally get that. But turn 5 is where a lot of the money is in this, which is unfortunate, but it's the way 40k is played right now, where there is a lot of things that we can do bottom of 5. And if you can make sure that you have the assets to go do those things, you will be in a better position.
Yeah, 100%. I do think and I don't think we covered this as being top of turn, so I want to just quickly hit this before we wrap up. As long as we talked about setting the tempo and setting the pace, you're going to trade some more units, but you still want to keep enough of live that you can burn your natural turn 5, if nothing else, right? Because you'll score holding 2 at the top of turn. And then as long as you make sure you take up enough space that they can't deny your burn on your natural on turn 5, you're securing that extra 5 points, and that's what you really want to make sure you can get that off if possible. If you haven't had an overly trady game where you're both super low on resources, that's going to make a huge difference, because if they're going to get a burn and you can't really deny it, you need to make sure you've at least secured your own.
Correct. Because if you're going first and you start the burn, you would have already scored your primary for that round. You're not scoring any other primary, brother. That's going to be gone. So it's much better to just be in a position where you make sure you are like, yeah, as Lane said, just burn your natural.
100%. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for another mission video. Hopefully, you all enjoy it and you do better on Scorched from now on. If you haven't joined the Discord, do so. Link is below. If you haven't liked, please do so. And last but not least, do not forget that victory is not given, it is forged, and it's forged right here on Mastercrafted. We will see you all next time.
See you guys.